Signing Gerald Everrett gives the Chicago Bears the dynamic tight end pairing they've been missing, and it opens up everything that new offensive coordinator Shane Waldron can do as a play caller.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, we check in on the newest Chicago Bears tight end, Gerald Everrett, who really can be a difference maker in this Bears offense, and a signing that I'm really excited about, pairing him with Cole Kmet. We'll look at what he did with Shane Waldron in the past and how that can fit together in this Bears offense this season. We'll also look at the now official departure of Darnell Mooney heading to the Atlanta Falcons, Justin Jones heading to the Arizona Cardinals, and the Chicago Bears meeting with a pass rusher. As of the time of this recording, haven't officially signed that pass rusher yet, but DJ Wonnum from the Minnesota Vikings scheduled to come to Chicago for a visit on Thursday. So we'll look at what he could provide, and just more generally, where the pass rusher market stands right now, with Danielle Hunter now off the board, with Wonnum on a visit, Justin Jones gone. And if we have time, we can touch briefly on the Bears signing free agent safety Jonathan Owens from the Green Bay Packers. But the big move on Tuesday, just the second day of free agent negotiating, was Gerald Everrett coming to the Chicago Bears, with tight end not being a huge need, but this quietly being a really effective move. A 2-year, $12 million contract with about $6 million guaranteed. Essentially, it's a 1-year, $6 million deal this year, and then if the Bears want him back, he can come back for another $6 million, or if for some reason it doesn't work out this season, they can cut him after that 1 year and be out of that contract without too much lingering on there. Maybe $6 million a year is a lot for a number 2 tight end, but Gerald Everett has the potential to be, a number 3 or 4 receiver in this offense when it's all said and done. Over the course of his career with Shane Waldron on the Los Angeles Rams and then reunited on the Seattle Seahawks, spent the past couple of seasons with the Los Angeles Chargers, and he's never been that guy who's really fully taken over as an elite top-of-the-line tight end, but coming to Chicago, he can be a true number 2 to Cole Kmet, but still have an effective role in this offense. I really see Gerald Everett as being everything I wanted Robert Tonyan to be last year. That obviously did not work out, but Gerald Everett is much more of a dynamic receiver than Tonyan has been, and someone who I think is going to be really fun in this offense. Most importantly, he's going to open up everything Shane Waldron wants to do as a play caller. We saw Waldron in Seattle, and we've certainly seen the Rams offense, when Waldron wasn't the play caller there, really utilize those multiple tight end sets to give them a lot of creativity and flexibility on offense that stretches defenses in different ways. When you can have 2 legitimate receiving threats at tight end, it puts the opposing defense in a tough spot to figure out how they want to defend you when you come out with both tight ends on the field. Typically, if you're going to line up with a running back and 2 tight ends, 12 personnel, that's a defense, or that's an offense. That's a formation grouping that the opposing defense will want to respond to with base defense. Load up the box with 7 guys, against a 4-3 team, 3 linebackers, 4 defensive linemen. Take your nickel back off the field and bring in that extra linebacker to load up, because you've got 2 tight ends and 5 offensive linemen. That's 7 blockers for your running back. You need to get extra guys in the box to be able to stop the run if the Bears are going to come out with Kmet and Everett at tight end. But if the teams are going to respond to that by bringing in an extra linebacker, then you're going to get better linebacker matchups for Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett running routes out of those formations. It's going to make the play action game that much more effective. And you can also put them in motion and spread them out and maybe put Cole Kmet and Gerald Everrett both at wide receivers and go 4 wide against the other team with perhaps a base defense as a response to that 2 tight end set. Like, there's a lot of different ways you can put these players in different spots on this Bears offense and get production that challenges defenses in different ways. When you look back at how Waldron used Everett in Seattle during their season together there, Everett played about 60% of his snaps that season at tight end. Another roughly 25% was in the slot, and then another roughly 15% was out wide. He was in the backfield a little bit here and there too, but like, he's mostly a tight end, but only like 60% a tight end. He's also then 37%, if I do my math right there, 37% a receiver, and then about 3% of a backfield player that can line up in a fullback or an H-back type of offset spot there. So you can put him in a lot of different positions. You can certainly put Cole Kmet in a lot of different positions as well. And all of those guys are going to give you plus matchups in the passing game that you feel like our guy can beat their guy in coverage, especially when it's a linebacker and not a cornerback or a safety. Everett is also one of the more effective tight ends after the catch in the NFL. Like, Cole Kmet is not the most dynamic in that regard. He's big. He makes tough catches. He's reliable over the middle. But Cole Kmet has never been that guy who's going to make 2 guys miss and break away for 60 yards down the sideline. I mean, plays like that happen, but it's not like his skill set, his forte there. But Gerald Everett is consistently near the top of the tight end rankings in terms of missed tackles that he's able to force after the catch. He's surprisingly shifty for a tight end, for a big-bodied player. Now, again, you're not going to mistake him for Travis Kelce. I mean, there's a reason he's available for a 2-year, $12 million contract. But at 6'3", 250 pounds, he is not easy to bring down. And it's those kind of plays for either a rookie quarterback like Caleb Williams, or if something changes with the Justin Fields situation, that if you end up checking it down to Everett or finding him anywhere on the field, like, he can turn that little 3-yard dump-off pass into a 10-yard gain and a first down at a little bit of a higher rate than a lot of tight ends, and certainly than what you would expect from your normal run-of-the-mill number 2 tight end. So you might feel like $6 million a year is a lot for your quote-unquote backup to Cole Kmet, but I think he's going to play a lot. I think he's going to be a really effective receiving option in this Bears offense. I don't think he's a great blocker overall, but I think he's like just good enough that the defense has to respect him as a blocker, and you're really going to put them in some tough spots to say, okay, do we defend the Bears 2 tight end sets with our nickel package, and then we're going to be light and susceptible to the running game, or do we defend the Bears 2 tight end sets with our base package, so then we're going to be heavy, but maybe a little bit more susceptible to the passing game? That's where things really open up for Shane Waldron to get players going in different motions, different formations, because you have tight ends like this that are versatile, that can be effective receiving and blocking threats and line up anywhere across your offense. That's what gets me really excited about Gerald Everett as the new Chicago Bears number 2 tight end. The Bears do still need to, though, address the rest of the offensive weapons. They still need a new number 2 wide receiver, as their number 2 wide receiver officially heading elsewhere, Darnell Mooney to the Atlanta Falcons. I want to check in on the wide receiver market, where the Bears were reportedly pursuing one of the other receivers that got a big contract like Mooney's. And we'll also look at some of the other Bears that have departed, and also the Bears targets that are still in their crosshairs next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp provides online therapy that's here to help you be your best self. I do online therapy every single week, and it's a really important part of my own personal mental health regimen, and I can't recommend a service like BetterHelp enough. I always compare it to like going to the gym, right? For my body, I want to take care of my body. I want my body to be at its best. So I go to the gym, not because my body's broken, but because I want it to be strong. And taking care of my brain is the same way. Therapy is like that gym for my brain. It's about being my very best and taking the best care of my mental health. And that's where BetterHelp can come in. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire, and then they match you with a licensed therapist. And if that first therapist just isn't the right one for you, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. the Chicago Bears officially will not bring back Darnell Mooney as expected. He signed elsewhere in free agency and leaves the Bears with that hole at the number 2 receiver spot that they still need to fill. And on the same day that Mooney leaves, the Bears did attempt to fill that number 2 receiver spot, reportedly pursuing former Buffalo Bills wide receiver Gabe Davis, who ended up leaving Buffalo and moving on to a new contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars at essentially the exact same price as Darnell Mooney. Both wide receivers signed 3-year, $39 million contracts. For your math whizzes out there, that's $13 million a year. Darnell Mooney got just a tiny bit more guaranteed money than Gabe Davis did. Mooney got 26 guaranteed. Gabe Davis got 24 guaranteed. And we'll see, as the rest of the numbers come out, if there's different incentives in there or different structures to that contract that might make one different than the other. But that's how the money played out right now. And the Bears reportedly were in the mix for Gabe Davis. Davis ultimately ended up choosing the Jaguars. We don't know what the Bears were offering, whether they were offering the same amount, whether, what kind of guarantee was in that. We certainly don't know if or how much the Bears were in on Darnell Mooney, but I could imagine, given how much Darnell Mooney struggled this past season, or more so how much his production remained low. I think there's a different conversation here about, is it Darnell Mooney struggling, or is it the offense around Darnell Mooney struggling that led to his lack of production? But back-to-back years under 500 receiving yards did not seem to me like a position where the Chicago Bears would hand him $13 million a year. I was a little surprised that the Atlanta Falcons handed him $13 million a year. And to be clear, I believe Darnell Mooney is going to go to Atlanta and be great. I think he's going to have a big bounce back and resurgence and be ultimately a good signing for them. But I thought, given that he's 2 years removed from being a 1,000-yard receiver, that it would dampen his free agent price tag a bit more. I thought Gabe Davis might get this kind of $13 million a year contract. I didn't think Darnell Mooney would quite get the same amount, but clearly Atlanta is confident in him to be able to get back to being the kind of receiver we saw him be earlier in his Bears career. Of course, former Bears general manager Ryan Pace is in the front office with the Atlanta Falcons, so a pretty easy connection there for him to go and get one of his guys and bring him back there. But we talked about this on today's Locked On NFL podcast, or I guess yesterday's. I think it came out on Tuesday. On the Locked On NFL podcast, I got to fill in as the host there. And we talked about the wide receiver market a little bit here. And the difference between Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney, they're both getting the same contract. But I think for me, Gabe Davis is the one who's a little bit more of a sure thing. You know what you're getting with Gabe Davis, whereas Darnell Mooney is the higher ceiling that you're betting on him getting back to being a 1,000-yard receiver. And with Gabe Davis, he's never been a 1,000-yard guy, but the last few seasons he's consistently been 600, 700, 800-yard receiver with 6 and 7 touchdowns every year. That's what you're getting with Gabe Davis. He might not ever be that 1,000-yard guy, but he's going to be a solid 600, 700-yard number 2 receiver. Whereas Mooney has been a 400-yard receiver the last 2 years, but you feel like he can get back to being that 1,000-yard guy, especially with Kirk Cousins and then Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson in that offense kind of taking some of the attention away. And all of that leaves the Bears still looking for their next wide receiver. Clearly, Ryan Poles pursuing some of the bigger names. He's not scraping the bottom of the barrel there. Again, Gabe Davis is not a 1,000-yard receiver. He's not the top name on the free agent market, but it shows that they're serious about adding at that position for a player that might be worth $10+ million a year. On this podcast, I've made the case for Tyler Boyd from the Cincinnati Bengals as a player I'd like to see. Certainly, I think you can make a strong case for Curtis Samuel from the Washington Commanders, who is a former teammate of DJ Moore's. We might throw in there. And then we've also talked about Josh Reynolds as a target I still feel like seems, I don't want to say likely, but there's too many dots you can connect there. Josh Reynolds of the Detroit Lions, but previously played for the Los Angeles Rams with Shane Waldron. So there's still options at wide receiver. And this is kind of the running theme for the Bears free agency across the board here. Don't panic. Players are signing. Players you wanted are signing with other teams. And we've talked about this a little bit this week. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but yes, Ryan Poles has missed out on a couple of the top edge rushers, a couple of the top interior pass rushers, a couple of top receivers now. He's not getting the top of the top guys, but like with Gabe Davis, he's not willing to overspend on players when he sees other reliable options out there. He just like last offseason, he sets a price tag and he says, okay, we like Mike McGlinchey, but we're not going to pay more than X dollars. And if he can get more than X dollars from the Denver Broncos, then he's a Denver Bronco. And if we like Gabe Davis, But if Gabe Davis is going to get more than X dollars from the Jacksonville Jaguars, then we're not going to outbid the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we're going to let him go to the Jaguars at a price that's beyond the point that they're comfortable with. Poles was comfortable with DeAndre Swift at his $8 million a year valuation. Poles was comfortable with Gerald Everett at his $6 million a year valuation. And now backup safety Jonathan Owens is like $2.5 million a year, whatever that contract ended up coming out to being. Like, they'll sign players when the price is right, but they're not going to be reckless with going out and just signing whoever. But the fact that they're still like in on all these players, it tells you Poles is not just sitting on his hands going, well, we'll just wait it out, see who's left and who's cheap. Like, no, it's not about waiting it out and just trying to be cheap and pinch every penny. It's about saying, like, I'm going to be aggressive to a point, to a limit, and I'm not going to go over aggressive. I'm not going to go past my comfort zone to get a player when there's plenty of fish in the sea here, right? Like, you can't just have a crush on one and do everything for them to try and really get them when you've got a lot of different other options here. And it's not like Gabe Davis or any of these individual players is going to be what makes or breaks the Chicago Bears. I've been saying all along, like, let's wait and see how free agency plays out. We've only been in 48 hours of this so far. Like, then we can evaluate, man, Poles really didn't do this or really missed on that. But let's kind of keep seeing what he's able to do at wide receiver, at edge rusher, at defensive tackle, especially as former Bear Justin Jones leaves to the Arizona Cardinals on a another one of these like surprisingly big contracts for a recent Chicago Bear that wasn't very productive. Justin Jones gets 3 years, $31 million, like $10 million a year for Justin Jones, who, like, sure, was a good leader and a good teammate and a player you like to have around, but had 4.5 sacks this past season, 3 the year before that. And this is not a 6 or 8 or 10 sack interior defensive lineman. Like, 4.5 sacks is a career high. Like, I don't think any of us were sitting here going like, wow, Justin Jones had a great season. Like, he was fine. And sure, if they re-signed him for a reasonable price, you wouldn't be mad about it. But he didn't have the kind of season where you're like, yeah, give that guy $30 million. Give him $10 million a year. Like, that one is a little bit of a head scratcher for me, but good for Justin Jones, and just leaves the Bears with a need to fill on that defensive line. We'll look at who's still left for Chicago, including the veteran free agent that they're bringing in for a visit this week, DJ Wonnum from the Minnesota Vikings, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Game Time, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I love using Game Time. It's the best ticket buying experience I've got anywhere else. I actually just used it over the weekend. I was in Orlando, and at the last minute, I was like, screw it. I want to go see an Orlando City Major League Soccer game. They were playing Minnesota United. I'd never been to an MLS game before. It looked like a cool environment, and it was a blast. Oh my God, the supporter section there is loud. It's electric. They scored the fastest goal in franchise history, which was nice. It was like 10 seconds. The first goal came in. Like, that stadium was rocking, and it was so much fun. And I got cheap tickets with a great seat from Game Time. I could see my view from my seat, so I knew exactly what I was going to getting, and all in prices with no added fees. It was actually cheaper than buying the ticket directly from the team. That's my favorite part about Game Time. So take the guesswork out of your ticket buying process with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem our code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The Bears still need to address the defensive line in a major way in free agency, and it's easy to get nervous and panicky and worried about whether or not the Bears are going to be able to properly do that with what's left on the free agent market. But already we know about a player that they're interested in bringing in, or are literally bringing in, and then we'll see if a signing ends up happening out of that, or a lot of other options still sitting out there on the free agent market. Let's start with the name that we do know is connected with the Bears. DJ Wonnum of the Minnesota Vikings is coming in for a visit on Thursday. Not a name at defensive end that gets you super excited, right? This is not the sexy name. This is not the Vikings defensive end that a lot of Bears fans wanted. Danielle Hunter signing with the Houston Texans on Tuesday. Worth noting that Ian Rappaport and others have said Danielle Hunter took less total money to play for the Houston Texans than he was getting offered from other teams. He did not explicitly say, and I've not seen anyone explicitly say that the Bears were offering Danielle Hunter more or anything like that. But it's worth noting that not all free agent decisions. When a player decides to sign with another team, doesn't mean that the Bears weren't in on them or that the Bears weren't offering them something better. Sometimes players make decisions with signings that are not purely about who's offering me the most money. There can be more to it than that. Always keep that in mind when the Bears don't get a free agent. But instead, turning their attention to Dennis O. Wanham Jr., a.k.a. DJ, who is the starter opposite Danielle Hunter this season in Minnesota, had a career-high 8 sacks, and in kind of this transition to the new defense there with the Brian Flores, the former Miami Dolphins head coach there. They blitzed a lot. To me, the 8-sack number is good. It's the second time he's hit the 8-sack mark. It's encouraging there, but Wanham is not like a top-tier edge rusher type guy. He's in the good class of edge rushers. I mean, average to above average. I don't know. I see him as a guy who was able to clean up Danielle Hunter a little bit more. Like, again, that's not, I don't mean that to be like purely an insult, because I mean, he had most of his career sacks have come against the Bears, more than any other team he's been against. We've seen him go one-on-one with a tackle and beat him. Like, it's not like every sack or every big pass rush is being put in his lap, but it has helped his production having Danielle Hunter on the other side. At the very least, he gets a lot of one-on-ones, and there are other plays where he might not directly beat his man, but then he does a good job of holding contain, and then Danielle Hunter pressures the quarterback towards him, and he's able to step in and get the sack. And that's not to say like that means Wanham is bad by any means, but he's just not. I think the 8-sack number is slightly inflated. I think on a per snap basis, he's not as consistent of a pass rusher as that sack number would indicate. But you put him in that Chicago Bears defensive line, instead of Danielle Hunter on the other side, you've got Montez Sweat. Like, that's a darn good running mate, that he could be a nice number 2 and have the same type of role in Chicago as he did with Minnesota. Like, I think the key for me here is the price tag. I don't want to pay DJ Wanham a bunch of money to be my number 2 edge rusher, on the other side of Montez Sweat. Like, to me, I see Wanham as a guy who's your other starter, but would rotate with DeMarcus Walker and rotate with other guys and not be the guy who's going to play 80% of the snaps, but more like a rotational guy in that mix. And so if you pay him rotational guy prices, if we're down in more like, I don't know the exact number range here, $6, $7, $8 million a year, and not $12, $13, $14 million a year, I'd feel a lot better about someone like Wanham. I mean, just kind of the price tag is going to be an important part of that conversation if the Bears ultimately do end up signing him. Just because he's coming on a visit doesn't guarantee that's going to be the case either, by the way. But, if you start to build together a Bears pass rush here with, another edge rusher there, and you got to find a defensive tackle replacement for Justin Jones on the interior, you can start to piece together something here that's not sexy as a Danielle Hunter on the other side or a Christian Wilkins on the inside, but it gets the job done. Like, at the end of the day, pass rush is pass rush, whether it's coming from big names or small names. If you're getting to the quarterback, you're getting to the quarterback. I don't really care how you're doing it. It's effective as long as you're able to do it, and that's what I want to see the Bears accomplish one way or another. You still have defensive tackles out there, like a Sheldon Rankins from Houston, like a Austin Johnson from the Chargers, or we've talked about Quentin Jefferson from the Jets as someone with a lot of connections to this Chicago Bears coaching staff. There's options here on the interior of the defensive line. And I have a feeling, given that the likes of Wilkins and others are off the market, the Bears aren't going to spend huge there either, but get you a rotational guy to play with Gervon Dexter. And you feel like, okay, you've got Dexter and Pickens and a free agent on the interior, and then maybe on the outside you've got Wanham and Walker and maybe a draft pick there. And all of a sudden, it's not the big names, but you can get a rotational pass rush here that collectively is effective at getting after the quarterback. That's what I think how Ryan Poles is approaching this, saying, we'll pursue some of the big guys, but we're not going to get past our skis here. We're going to set our price limits, and then we're going to find other ways to keep filling out this pass rush. Remember last offseason, it was a long process to finish out this pass rush. It took to training camp when Unique Ngakoue ended up coming in. You never know what veteran player might end up getting cut later on in the offseason, or certainly there's additional trade targets out there. The Chargers are reportedly shopping Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. The Eagles are reportedly shopping Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. I hope we don't double up on the Sweats because that'll get confusing. But you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of different options here, and we don't need to panic every time a pass rusher signs with another team and say, oh, the Bears aren't going to be able to get anybody. Again, let's see what Ryan Poles does, and then we can be upset if we get to the end of free agency and they have failed to address that position. That's when you can say, yes, Ryan Poles missed out. But let's give him the chance to make his moves, and then we can judge how he executed that plan, as opposed to trying to kill Ryan Poles right now before free agency has even actually literally started and before he's had any kind of chance to finish what he's already started putting together with this Bears team. Like, I like the Gerald Everett signing. Not as crazy about DeAndre Swift. I like Kevin Byard at the safety spot. Like, it's patience and it's coming together. And remember, winning free agency does not mean winning regular season football games. Rarely does the big free agent spending result in the big wins. I think big free agent spending is mostly reserved for like when you're one player away. You know, if you're in your Super Bowl window and you're like, man, we just need that Von Miller to add to our Buffalo Bills defense. Let's take that to the next level. Go get him. Go spend that on that big guy. But if you're the Denver Broncos last season, you spend a bunch on Mike McGlinchey and then a bunch on Draymond Jones. And there's another big free agent they signed too, but I can't think of it. They spend a bunch in free agency, and look where that got them. Russell Wilson's gone, and they're trying to rebuild because spending a bunch in free agency doesn't always mean that those players are going to pan out. So Ryan Poles isn't going to go spend just for the sake of spending. He's going to try and be deliberate about getting this talent in here. And I feel like Gerald Everett is a guy who can be like that. If the price is right on DJ Wonnum, maybe he can be like that. I do think DeAndre Swift will make this Bears team better, just not ideally where I would have spent my money at that spot. So we'll see what happens. Free agency, again, is just literally just about to actually start. So that's when more moves will pick up. And in the next coming days and weeks, we'll break down all of the big Bears free agent signings for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for your second listen, we're doing a really cool thing to kick off baseball season here on the Locked On Podcast Network. As you know, we've got the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today. And so if you're a big baseball fan, mark your calendars because on March 20th at 6 p.m. Central Time, we're going to have the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to our Locked On Sports Today channel. Again, that's a week from today, Wednesday, March 30th at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Whether you're a Cubs fan, a White Sox fan, or some other team anywhere around Major League Baseball, find it at March 20th, 6 p.m. on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, or we also have a free Amazon Fire TV channels app for Locked On Sports Today for all of your Major League Baseball preview action coming up next Wednesday. So go check that out. Of course, you got to come back for another episode of Locked On Bears. All the free agency updates you need right here. We got to talk about the Justin Fields trade market not materializing as well on the podcast. And however this plays out every day in free agency, you can be sure we'll find another opportunity for you to bear down.